Yeah,
You know,
probably.
it would
Like,
be
I mean,
something
there's
like
probably like
that.
some wild hypothetical other that I could say otherwise, but not that
Yeah,
I can
that you
think
would
of.
not.
So I mean,
Yeah,
we probably agree.
yeah. Okay. So okay, I think I'm there. So if we found instances in God that were considered an absence of good, um, would that would that would that would that
Yes.
jeopardize the definition of goodness?
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Okay. So then we would have to decide what is good or what isn't good, right? So like if I started pulling Bible verses out that are questionable,
Right.
is that what it would take?
I think that's possible, but the problem is that you'd have to find something that's like a complete contradiction that would be void of any good justification for why an action would happen. And the problem with that is that when you're in the internal critique here,
Mm-hmm.
you have to take the whole worldview when you're going to be in the internal critique. So we
Right,
assume
right, right,
already
right.
that we're going through Job, and we look at the last few chapters where God just
Mm-hmm.
asks a bunch of questions
Mm-hmm.
at the end of things that we would never know the answer to. And so he's telling
Yeah.
us in that hey, you're not going to know the answer to why these things happen, but you have to trust that they're good. And if we assume that God is all good in the internal critique, or we at least just assume that he's all knowing, then we know that he has
Mm-hmm.
a justification for X or Y thing, even if we
Okay.
don't believe it. So it's a really difficult spot for you to be here on the internal critique there if you want to take the whole worldview.
Okay. So I guess if we're going to take the entire worldview, and if we take, for example, unaliving children, what in the entire worldview, what are some circumstances that you can think of that it's okay to unalive children?
Yeah. So I mean, I would just go back to Job first, and then I'll give you like a
Mm-hmm.
possible idea after that. So
Yeah.
us not knowing wouldn't entail that there isn't a justification, and that's what God tells us and warns us about when we're trying to understand the justification of his actions. So in the internal critique, that's not really like the strongest question just because of the other things God has told us if we're assuming that worldview. But I'll just grant it, and we can talk about the
Well,
whole unaliving
I
children
guess
thing and go there
I
too.
guess because well, I'm asking you, is there any situation? I didn't really hear an
Yeah,
answer.
yeah.
Is there any
No,
situation
no,
where
no.
it's okay to unalive children? What situations
Yeah, I
can you
told
think
you.
of?
Yeah, I told you I would go there. I just wanted to make sure that point was clear first. But so going
Yeah.
there, I mean, the Christian metaphysic of death is just going to be so different than it is going to be in the atheistic worldview. So,
Mm-hmm.
all death is in the Christian worldview is just a changing of location. So, if your
Mm-hmm.
changing of location is into God's arms, death probably isn't a bad thing in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a bad thing if you're going to a bad place,
Is the
but that's
method
not
of
necessary.
unaliving factor into that?
Well, I could,
Like if they're
maybe. I mean,
Thanos
this
out
this would
versus
entail.
suffered, like if they're suffering versus just Thanos out of existence.
Yeah, if we got to like the most insane hypothetical of like suffering,
Mm-hmm.
there probably would be like at least an emotional intuitive question about it.
Yeah.
But I would just go back to Job of like the question of justification is so far out of like our mental state's ability. And so like this is such a question that'll get clouded with just emotional judgment that's just going to be baked into it,
Emotional judgment.
obviously.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, yeah.
but what
Which
drives the
obviously, I
emotional?
mean,
Yeah, but what drives the emotional judgment? That's why I picked children
yeah, we
versus
don't like suffering.
a
That's why.
serial
Also,
unaliver,
I got to be
right?
back at work at 4, so I'm going to start walking in here soon. But
Okay,
keep probing at me.
okay. So, like for example, here, if can you read that? Can you see that? This is
Yeah.
Second
I got like
Kings.
3 minutes before I got to walk inside. But keep
Okay,
going.
so Second Kings 23 through 25, and this is this is where Elisha was insulted by kids. He went up there to Bethel, and while he
Yeah.
was
With the
there
bear.
going up, yeah. So the Lord sent 2 she bears to maul 42 kids. So
Yeah.
is there any situation where this is okay?
I mean, if we assume that God has the correct justification, then obviously there would end up being a justification for it, as much as our moral intuitions would say otherwise. But
Right.
if we're not working on an objective stance outside of that, then I don't think we'd be able to say that there's anything wrong
That
with
there's
it. So, like, the
anything.
only way to actually make this point is like through the Christian worldview's objective morality stance
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
to even start to answer the question.
Right. To even
But the
start
other thing
answering the
too is
question.
like assuming that there's something bad about suffering. in the first place. I think
Mhm.
there's probably circumstances where suffering isn't a good thing, but I mean, if Christ suffered, we know it isn't a bad thing on its
Yeah,
face.
yeah. And so I guess what I'm hearing then is, so is it basically because God did it, it's okay?
Not exactly because he did it, but because there is a justification
There's a
for said
justification.
action. So, like,
Okay.
if I told you to like slap someone in the face, and
Hmm.
then you were like, "Oh, that sounds like a bad idea," and then you like learned that this guy did like X horrible thing, and then was going to actually end up just
Yeah.
changing his life if that ended up happening and went through. It's like, okay, so now we can conceive that there's a justification for something like that. And so, if we forward that to like the worst possible thing in the world, what would be the symmetry breaker to say that actually there wouldn't be a justification for something way worse than that? Would it just be
Yeah.
because there's more severity, or
Well, I think that's kind of where I was about to go with this. Is what justification is there for to maul 42 kids for just making fun of somebody?
yeah, yeah, no, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I think the
What would be
question
that
there would end up,
justification?
and this will probably have to be my last point before I got to
Okay.
jump on inside, and then you just take the last word after that. I think we would just go back to, if God's telling us in Job that anything's fine that way, then I mean, um, if he, as long as he has a justification, then it'll end up being okay. So
Then
it's just going
okay.
to strictly depend on that. I got to jump on out now
All right.
because I got to be back at 4.
All
But,
right. Thanks, Ethan.
yeah, it was a good
Appreciate
chat
you
with you,
coming
man.
up.
I'll
All
jump
right.
back on another time.
Okay. Sounds good. Take care. Okay. I don't know about you. Appreciate you, Ethan, coming up, and I think honestly that is horrific. I can't think of any justification for a God to maul 42 kids for making fun of a prophet. I cannot see any justification for that. And he was trying to invoke, well, it's an emotional thing. You know what? I don't really care because these are children. They're supposed to not know any better, right? Doesn't Jesus say, "Bring the children to me"? Yeah, there isn't any. There is no justification for this. He was aggressively bald. He was Jay Leach. He was, go away, bald.